everybody and welcome back to my channel. So welcome back to the little spare room in our holiday let. I'm doing the Q&A today. So a lot of you on my last video have sent me loads and loads of questions and I'm going to go through them now with you. You might want to grab a cup of tea and a biscuit because there are a lot of questions and some of them do slightly cross over, so I'm really sorry if I repeat myself. But I just want to make sure that I sort of answered every element of everyone's questions. So grab a drink, come back and we'll carry on with the video. I'd also want to apologise if you can hear Luna the Poochie in the background making disgusting noises with her Kong. I put some peanut butter in there to keep her occupied. And I've left the door open so that I can hear her if she's going to be naughty. So if you can hear that too, I do apologise, it's not very nice. Anyway, okay, so the first question is from Hannah, and Hannah said, how many projects were you making when you first started? Like 1 or 2 garments a month or more? And do you still wear any of your first makes? When I first started, I was literally only making maybe 1 or 2 a month, you're right. Mainly because I didn't have time, and because they did, when I was first starting, they did take me a lot longer to make, so I needed to set aside like a good amount of time to complete something. And I think if you are starting out and you really want to progress, try and set yourself a target of completing 1 item a month, because I think if you leave it too long between projects then you forget things and you get frustrated, whereas if you have like quite a good rhythm, or even if you do a little tiny bit towards that project every week, then everything you're learning is quite fresh. So yeah, I was only making maybe 1 or 2 things a month when I first started. And do I still wear any of my first makes? I do. They might be rubbish, and every time I wear some of my really old things I sort of notice a wonky hem or like some stitching on it, but you know, there's a reason why I made that garment in the first place, and I am proud that that's how I started. So it is really good to keep wearing and keep checking on your items that you used to make, and also just to see how far you've come. I think it's really, really useful. But yeah, I do still wear the first Coco dress I ever made all the time. What else? I mean, I made a lot of Cocos in the first few months when I started making clothes, because I think I got into the habit of, once I made one thing I was like, oh, I can make this, and then I just keep repeating the same pattern. But yeah, I still make them. I still wear all my first makes. Bree asked, how did you learn to make clothes? Do you have dressmaking classes? Where would you suggest to learn? Or if self-taught, what tips do you suggest? So, how did you learn to make clothes? I think I've told this story already, but basically I was teaching free machine embroidery classes at Tilly and the Buttons in London, and Tilly was there one day and we were chatting about dressmaking and stuff, and I had dabbled in my teenage years in making my own clothes. Those items I definitely do not wear today. It was more like if I was going to a party, I'd like rip apart a vintage dress and make it look cool, but I would look hideous in them now and I would be dreadfully embarrassed to walk down the street in them. But I did used to do a lot of sewing and making my own clothes when I was younger, or customising clothes anyway. And then Tilly said, oh, why don't you just get back into it? And I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm really scared. I don't know if I'd be good at it. Like I know I'm good at what I do, and I don't want to. I am one of those people that if I'm not good at something, it does get on my nerves a bit. But then she said, oh, just get a Coco pattern and have a go. I promise you, it's not difficult. You'll really like it, and then it'll just like start you off, and then you can just carry on going. And I was like, oh, okay. And I love Tilly to bits, so I didn't want to upset her. So I got a Coco, and it honestly changed my life, and I'm so glad she encouraged me to do it, because I don't think I'd be making clothes now if she hadn't have just said, oh, just have a go, like what you got to lose, do you know what I mean? And she is right. Like, I think the fear of doing something wrong does hold you back, and it doesn't really matter if you do something wrong because you're learning. And I think from looking at my first Coco to like my most recent Coco make, they're not that different. Maybe there's a few mistakes here and there and maybe something slightly wonky, but it's still the same garment, and no one else apart from me would notice those things. So so yeah, that's how I got back into making clothes. Do I have dressmaking classes? No. I do private lessons and I teach children where I am in Dorset, but I don't have any specific dressmaking classes. I do one-to-one tutoring, so if someone asks me to make a skirt with them, then I will. But I am expanding the business into my teaching side a bit more soon. So if you are in the Dorset area, there may be some things coming up that might benefit you. Or if you live further afield and you don't mind coming down to Dorset, great. But if you go to my Facebook page, which is Jessie Handmade, there is a questionnaire survey that I've put on there. It should be right at the top of my feed. And it would be really helpful if some of you could answer some of those questions, because I do really want to do more teaching, because I get asked about it all the time. And I just want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So there's a few questions on there about like what you would want from a workshop dressmaking wise. So if you get the chance, do go and fill that in. Where would you suggest to learn, or if self-taught, what tips do you suggest? So suggesting learning places, I mean, you can find workshops around near you locally. I'm not sure of everyone in every county that does dressmaking workshops, but I'm sure if you go on the Google, you should be able to find something near to you. But if you're self-taught like me, I don't know how to explain it. I think it was more of a case of, if I didn't understand something in a pattern, I'd go to YouTube. And YouTube is such a huge platform, and there are so many sewers on there. You know, there's such a wide variety of things that you can research, that it is a really, really useful tool if you're learning. So definitely check out YouTube if you're stuck on anything. And I will be doing more sew-alongs soon, because I know a lot of you really find those helpful. And they are, because you're sort of sewing along with me. So if you are doing the same pattern, you can pause and do the video as we go along. And I will be doing more, I promise. I just have to get back in my house. But yeah, YouTube is amazing if you're self-taught. Other bloggers who explain things well, they're also great. But yes, obviously it's not as good as having a one-to-one teacher or going to a workshop where a real human is standing in front of you. Which is why I do want to expand my teaching side of my business a bit more. But there is other options out there, especially if you live quite far away from different places. You know, the internet should be your sort of like go-to place when it comes to learning. Pumper, I'm not sure if that's your name or just your username, but she asks, how long have you been sewing? How would you describe your style, and was your sewn wardrobe different to your ready-to-wear one? So how long have I been sewing? I've been sewing general sewing since I was about 4. My mum taught me to sew. She'd sewn all my life. She used to make costumes for me for school and ballet, and I think my mum first made me make a cross-stitch bookmark or something. So I've been sewing since I was very, very young. I know that probably doesn't help a lot of you who are just starting out, but it shouldn't make a difference. I mean, from when I was about 10 to when I was probably 13, I didn't sew at all, and then I suddenly started when I was sort of 13, 14 again. And then I sort of moved away from it again, and then I came back to it. It's one of those things where every time I started again, I almost forgot everything I knew. So don't worry. You can learn to sew at any age. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever. How would you describe your style, and was your sewn wardrobe different to your ready-to-wear one? My style is, well, I'm wearing a vintage Space Cat jumper right now. My style is very varied, but day to day when I'm working, I generally wear t-shirt, jumper, leggings or jeans day to day. But then at the weekends, I do like to mix it up a bit, wear my dungarees. You know, when I'm going out, I like to wear dresses and blouses and tops and things like that. So I think everyone's a bit like that. We have our sort of go-to everyday outfits, and then we have our sort of like nicer clothes as well. My sewing style is very different to my ready-to-wear one in that I definitely am more confident when I wear my own makes. And I'm not sure why that is. I think mainly maybe I am just proud of what I make, and I want to show it off. But I seem to be way more daring with the colours and the patterns and the style. Like, I've been making things at the moment, say like the Kilo wrap dress by Named Clothing, that black jersey dress you might have seen on my Instagram. I'm obsessed with that, but I would never in a million years go to a shop and buy a Japanese style black dress that's to the floor. Never. I'd go, oh, I don't know if I could wear that, oh, you know, oh, it's not really my thing. And I'd move past it and I'd probably pick up like a little pink frilly thing in the corner. But I love that dress, and it does look so good on, and everyone comments on it when I wear it. So that makes me feel really good. And I just think if you make your own clothes, it does definitely give you more confidence to try other things and try new things and try new colours and patterns that you might not have bought. And I find that I fall in love with a fabric and then I make something out of it because I love the fabric so much, and that helps as well, because if you fall in love with the fabric then you love it 10 times more than anything else, do you know what I mean? Whereas if you go to a shop and you're like, oh, that plain white t-shirt looks nice, and you buy it, do you know what I mean? Whereas like I now like got tops with pugs all over it, do you know what I mean? So I do think that if you sew your own clothes, it definitely pushes your sort of style boundaries, which I'm actually really happy that I've done. Sally asked, do you sell your makes, and if so, are they your own designs? I would love to start selling baby clothes, but I'm unsure on the laws about selling other pattern designers' clothes. I'm assuming that you may have to contact the companies to ask, but thought you might know something more on the subject. So no, I never sell my makes. I only make things for myself and friends babies and things like that. A lot of pattern houses do have on the pattern for personal use, not for commercial resale. Oh, that's the tumbler dryer. I'm just gonna go do the tumbler dryer and then we'll come back. So yeah, as I was saying, I know a lot of pattern houses do have written on their patterns that you're not allowed to use them for commercial use, but there are pattern companies that you can. And I'm pretty sure that the baby clothes company patterns that I always use from Brindle and Twig, I'm pretty sure you can sell those. And I think there's actually a Brindle and Twig sort of like online forum on Facebook where people sort of show off their makes. So there are companies out there that do sell patterns that you can use and sell on, which is wonderful, but I personally don't do that. So I think either contact the companies or just look out for when you buy the patterns what the terms and conditions are. If it says for personal use only, then you know you can't sell it on. Okay, so Sewing Janie says, how long have you been sewing? I've already answered that since I was probably about 4. I've not sewn much on stretchy. What types of thread should I use and what size needle? So I use the ballpoint stretch needles when I'm sewing jersey, and I can't remember what size they are. The ones I got, I think they're just the universal ones, but the ballpoint jersey style. So I'm not very good with needle sizes, and I know I should be, but I still don't know what it means or what the difference is between them. But I do change my needle to what it says on the tin, if that makes sense. So general day-to-day I use universal needles, which I think are like 90/14, and then I have machine embroidery needles when I'm doing my business sort of work. And then for dressmaking, it depends on what fabric I'm using. So if it's silks or thin fabrics, I use Sharps needles, which are like really, really thin, pointy ones. If I'm sewing jersey, I use ballpoint. So I do buy a range of needles when I'm buying them, so that I always have stuff in my supplies ready to use for different fabrics. When it comes to thread type, I stick to good quality threads like Gutermann. I generally stick to polyester. I think unless you're sewing natural fibered clothes anyway, then you don't need to worry about cotton. You can get those sort of polycotton mixes, I think, but all the threads that I use for everything are polyester. But I would recommend getting good quality ones rather than cheap ones, because they won't last as long if you buy them cheap. I have made things in the past where I've sort of gone, oh, it's just a cheap thread that I've got and I've never used. I think sometimes they come in like gift sets and stuff of different things that I've bought, and they break, and it's so frustrating, and they break through the machine, and then you're sewing a hem and you might try it on and then it snaps because you've done it too tight and all that jazz. So I definitely recommend investing in good quality threads. Okay, so Emma has a business question. She says, the problem I have is with business is managing bookkeeping, a website, craft fairs, any tips on any of those? So bookkeeping, everybody hates bookkeeping. I don't think there's anyone in the world that likes going through everything that they've ever bought or sold and typing it all in. It's annoying, it's boring, and it's frustrating. I personally hate it. Then my accountant told me to get QuickBooks. And it's, if you don't know what QuickBooks is, it's an online, basically it's an online bookkeeping where you connect up your bank account, your PayPal accounts, anything like that, and it just feeds it all into one system. The only thing you have to do is input cash ins and outs manually, but compared to doing all the spreadsheet stuff, it's so much quicker. It's just all automated, so it's really easy, and then you can cross-reference your bank statements because you know it's from your bank, so you just like tick 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 tick, they're all there, and your accountant can sign in and use the reports from it. So easy. Yes, obviously it takes a bit of time to set up, and it takes a bit of time to input your cash transactions and anything else, but apart from that, I love it, and I'd rather do that than Excel sheets every day. Websites, I'm actually in the process of possibly changing my website soon. My boyfriend used to be a web designer, so when I first started he set up my site for me, and then I learned a bit of coding with him, and then I've been managing my website ever since. It does get frustrating and it does take time, and that's the only bad thing about doing your own website is, you know, it does take a time to sit down for hours and take photos of products and upload them and write good descriptions and get it all set up. But once you've got the majority of your stuff on there, it's so much easier. But I am in the process of changing it over because I think that I've reached the boundaries of what I can physically do through WordPress coding. And I'm no expert at all, and my boyfriend sadly doesn't really do it anymore, so he's sort of like lost love for coding and stuff like that. So I'm in the process of changing it over, and I'm actually looking at Wix websites, and they have a Wix stores. It's W-I-X, Wix, not Wix the builders merchants. And so far I've just been looking into it. I've been comparing different prices on like online shops that you can buy through these website builders, and it seems like the best value for what you can get on it, and I've been really impressed so far, and it's so easy to do. So I'm not 100% sure if I'll go ahead with it, but at the moment I'm just on like a free trial where I can sort of play around with everything and see how it works and see how long it will take me to do things. So that's really exciting, but yes, it does take time. So I'd recommend, if you're not good at coding and you're not good at keeping up to date with software updates and things like that, then I definitely recommend getting a website builder to have it as a platform for your online shop, because it just makes things easier. Or if you have enough money, pay a website builder to do it for you, but it does get pricey. As far as craft fairs goes, I have lessened the amount of craft fairs that I do. When I first started with all my personalised gifts, I used to do craft fairs every week, and it got very, very tiring, and especially in the winter I hated standing outside. And because my stuff is personalised, it's not stuff that you can stand there really and buy on the day. So I used to get really disheartened if I didn't have any orders and stuff taken from craft fairs, but then I thought to myself, well, if you don't need it there and then, or you don't have a wedding or a christening, then you're not going to order it, are you? And I used to always just sell like cards every day, which is great, but it is disheartening when you've paid for like a whole day to be at a craft fair and you've only taken like 20 quid's worth of cards. I don't do as many anymore because personalised orders, like I said, are made to order. So if you've got my card, then you'd go on my website when you need something. If you're selling ready-made stuff, then obviously I'd definitely recommend going to them. I'd also recommend trying loads and loads of different craft fairs and seeing which ones you like the best. Don't just stick to one or two. try and move yourself around a bit so that you're constantly adding different customers from different areas, and then go back to the same ones and then see how you go second time. And if second time round it's not as good, then you can just tick those off. That's the hardest thing, I think, like finding the right fairs and the right customers for what you're selling, and it is just trial and error, so you might get frustrated, but just go with it. Start small and then work your way up to the bigger ones. Muriel asked, how best to dry lengths of jersey or stretch fabric before cutting and sewing? You can't hang them on the line or drape it anywhere, or put it in the tumble dryer, so how do you dry them? So I must admit, I do occasionally put my stretch fabrics in the tumble dryer. I do put them on a cool dry, but if they're a really fluffy or like really knitted fabric where there's a lot of texture, don't put them in the tumble dryer, because they get all those little bobbles all over it and it ruins it, and you'll never ever sort that out again. So the best way to do it, if you've got a tricky jersey, is do what I do, and I pull it out of the washing machine and I fold it maybe into two, and then I lie it on the floor on some towels. And you just have to take up a large area and you just lie it flat on some towels. Try and get, like, don't fold it too much. If you've got a lot, then you might need to fold it 2 or 3 times, but try not to fold it so that when you open it out to cut out, those lines are going to be in your way. Do you know what I mean? So you don't want to do too much pressing and too much overstretching before you've even cut it out. So just try and lie it flat with as little folds as possible on some towels on the floor, and just tell all your family not to walk on it. Nikki said, how did I start my collaboration with Minerva Crafts? So I'm not sure I can remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I was buying a lot of fabric from them, and then one day I was like, I wonder if they'd be interested in me making stuff for them, and then I just contacted them, and then they said, oh yeah, you can join our blogger network, and they made it all very, very easy. And they looked at my blog and my website, and they saw what I was doing and what sort of fabrics I was interested in and what sort of patterns I was using, and then I've been working for them, making monthly blog posts every month, and I absolutely love it. I love working with fabric shops like that, because there's such a wide range of fabrics, they're always different, and there's so many bloggers on the blogger network that there's enough variety, so everyone's making really different things, and I really, really like that. So yeah, so I love working with them, and I look forward to my next project that's going up there next month, which I am in love with. Jay has a lot of questions, so thank you, Jay. Pattern alterations. If you are enlarging a pattern to suit your measurements, do you have to make a sleeve adjustment too? If so, how would you go about that? That's the first question. So I've never, it sounds so like unhelpful and, well, it's just unhelpful, but I've never had to make a pattern adjustment. I don't have very big boobs, I don't have a very big bum, so I'm quite like boy shaped, I'm quite sort of like straight down, and I'm quite slim. So I've annoyingly never had to make any adjustments, which will be extremely frustrating for a lot of you. But from what I can imagine, if you made say a fuller bust adjustment or something, then the underarm seam might need to move in, but you would just extend more under the arm, and you shouldn't have to make that sleeve adjustment. But if you are, say, going lower than the original because you wanted to have a bit more space in the arm, then you would have to make a sleeve adjustment. So I would only watch, if you're adjusting patterns like that, the side seam going down, and then the sides of the sleeves that go like that, you know, that wave shape. So you'd have to extend that out if you were going lower towards your rib cage down. But yes, I'm sure there is someone on YouTube with a better explanation of actually how to do fuller bust adjustments. In fact, the Crafty Pinup, she's very curvy, and I'm very, very jealous of her figure. She's literally like a vintage doll. But I know that there's a few patterns that she's had to make bust adjustments for. So definitely check her channel out, because I'm sure in one of her sew alongs she's made an adjustment like that, and that might be quite helpful to you. But sadly, I just take it out of the packet, trace my size, and then put it together. I know that's really unhelpful. How do you go about working on a pattern hack? So this is a tricky one because I do tend to sort of just have a go, and I like the way I learn from that because I sort of push my boundaries a bit more. But I would say that if you're combining patterns, that's slightly easier because especially with my jumpsuit pattern hack where I combine 2 Teal in the Buttons patterns, really easy because they both are from the same company and the sizing's exactly the same, so I just join them together. Whereas if you were combining different parts of a pattern or combining 2 completely different patterns, that's where the tricky thing is. So I would recommend, if you're doing that and you do just want to have a go, work out what you like from the patterns and what you want to change. Then have a look at the instructions and the order in which you have to make it and where in that order you'd have to change that aspect to it. And I'd start off small, maybe by adjusting heights and different sleeves and different collars, and then move on to sort of like combining patterns together. And I would always recommend, if you are going to do something like that, getting some cheap fabric, cutting out your pattern pieces, and then having a go on the cheap fabric first to see how that goes before you then cut it out of nice fabric, because the only way you can learn how to do something in your head is if you actually physically do it, in my opinion. And obviously you don't want to ruin your nice fabric for that item, so get some cheap stuff and have a practice on that. Is there a particular way to cut a stretch fabric in order that it gives? I assume the fabric is one-way stretch. It depends on the fabric. Sometimes the fabric is two-way stretch, sometimes the fabric is one-way stretch, but always cut stretch fabric selvage to selvage in half. So selvage to selvage long ways. Keep it on a really flat surface, use pattern weights instead of pins, and if you can, use a rotary cutter on a mat instead of scissors because it stops it moving. How do you go about making an exact replica of one of your own garments, and how do you create the facings? So if you've already got a garment at home, I just trace the different parts onto paper. So say I was doing this jumper, for the sleeve I would lie it flat and I would draw around here, around the cuff, and go underneath, and then I'd say that this bit would be drawn on the fold, and then I would add your seam allowance to that pattern. So once you've drawn and traced around it, keep it nice and flat, then I add maybe a centimetre or 15 millimetres around the edge for my seam allowance, and then you do the next bit and lay it out, but you just got to look underneath. So like you make sure that that bottom seam of your sleeve is where you need it, and then lie it flat so you get the shape of the arm and things like that. But you always have to add your seam allowance afterwards. But yeah, that's how I copy clothes, and that's how I do it with a lot of my teenage students that have extra tuition, because a lot of teenagers want to copy clothes they already have. So we just trace each component out and then we put it together. The best thing about copying your own clothes is that you know that they fit you well, so you don't have to do any adjustments. How do you create the facings? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but say it's like a top facing, I always just copy the same neckline again, but I make a band and then I just sew it together and then fold it, do some you know, the edge, what's it called? Oh my god, what's it called? Where you sew along the edge of the facing so that it tucks under. Oh my god, my brain's gone dead. But you do that so that the facings always roll under. That's how I do it. I just literally, wherever I've drawn the collar and where I want it, then I copy it exactly again, but I just make a thin band and then you just join it at the shoulders like you would, and then put it underneath. So I hope that answers your question. That's what you meant. Pam, do you have a favourite thread that you use? When you move back into your house, will you give us a sewing tour? A sewing room tour? Yes, of course I will. I'm extremely excited about my new studio. My favourite thread to use are Gutermann threads. Gutermann, polyester, in every colour under the sun. They are my favourite. My favourite thing to make and favourite type of fabric to sew with, again from Pam. Favourite thing to make, I'm not sure about that one, because if you're referring to a particular pattern, I have no idea because I love trying new ones. But in terms of general sewing, for my business, it's my personalised portraits. For dressmaking, it's anything with jersey. So at the moment, anything with jersey. And again, favourite type of fabric to sew with, jersey. Layla, how and when did you start sewing? I think I've answered that. I'm very new to sewing. Do you have any tips on how to improve, and what are the easiest things to work with at the beginning? So if you are new to sewing, dressmaking wise, pyjama bottoms are great, because you don't have to worry about the fit too much, and there's a few skills in it that take a bit of time and a bit of concentration, but then when it comes together it's like ta-da! There's a video on my channel of 5 beginners pattern recommendations of like things that I think you should try if you're just starting out, so definitely check those out and look at those patterns. Things like the Coco from Tilly and the Buttons, great if you want to start sewing with stretch fabrics. Any tips on how to improve? I know everyone's going to say the same thing and you're probably going to roll your eyes at me, but practice does make perfect, and don't get frustrated. My mum always told me that when I did things wrong, I'd be tempted just to bin it, but mum would always hand me an unpicker and say unpick it, because every stitch you unpick and the time it takes for you to unpick it, you learn that you never want to do that again, and you want to concentrate really, really badly to get that right the next time round. So don't be tempted when you get frustrated to just go like, oh, forget it, I'm never going to be good at sewing, I'm just going to chuck it in the bin. Unpick it, start again. It may be annoying, but I promise you, you will learn faster doing that than you will if you just give up. Paige, do you have any tips for working with awful flimsy pattern paper in commercial patterns? I find the cutting out stage the most frustrating part of making a garment. I totally agree. I hate flimsy pattern paper. I always lay my pattern pieces out flat, and then I loosely cut around each one so that they're not in those big sheets. And then I dry iron them on a really cool iron to make them flat and crease free, and then I trace them onto good Swedish dressmaking pattern paper. It is expensive for what it is, but it makes life a whole lot easier, and it's on better quality paper, which lasts a lot longer. So that's what I do. I trace. I know a lot of people don't like tracing, but I hate that thin tissue, so I would rather trace it on nicer paper, even though it takes longer. Sage asks, I need a new iron. What do you use? Are you happy with it? And does it have good features? Well, I have a Bosch iron, and funnily enough, the one that's in this room right now, which is where I do the ironing, is also a Bosch one. They are a bit more expensive, but I really, really like them. I always get ones with like quite a large water container in it, because I hate filling that up. I'm just lazy. I used to use my nan's old iron for ages and ages and ages, and in fact it's still in my workroom at home at the moment. I personally aren't that fussy about irons. The only thing I hate about them is when the temperature isn't sensitive and it just goes like super hot suddenly, even though you haven't asked it to, and then you accidentally burn things. So if you get, I would recommend Bosch irons, because I use one here and I use one at home, and it's the big chunky container ones, with like a good range of settings and temperatures. Don't be tempted to go for like a cheaper one, because the temperature will be off and you'll end up scorching your fabrics, which nobody wants. Kate says, how did you market your creations in the beginning before you had happy customers and good reviews to help? That is a difficult question. I'm very lucky that where I live is very small. So when I first started out, I would when I first started out, I was still working at my local farm shop, and I used to do only markets. And every time someone placed an order, at the craft fairs, I'd always hand out tons of leaflets and cards. I definitely recommend it, and try and put like a 10% off or something on them, just to sort of like encourage someone to just check out your stuff. Even if they just look, then it's in the back of their minds. And then when people would order something, I'd always put like a little thank you note with a handwritten note and things like that, and then again with a discount code for like their next order. And then since then, it is word of mouth that has been my best friend, and I do put a couple of cards in different packages so that someone can give it to someone else. And also, if you do special offers, so only for loyal customers, mind you, I do special offers and special like first look previews and stuff for my loyal customers, which is really, really helpful. But I think once you've established like quite a good loyal customer base, then it just sort of like spiders out from there. But definitely when I first started out, cards and leaflets and handwritten thank you notes did go a long way. And also I think just making an effort with customers. It might only be that one customer that week that spends £20 with you, but they've made a difference to your life, and I think that you shouldn't take that for granted. Even if you're frustrated and you know you feel like you can't afford to buy that sandwich, I've been there. It's a horrible feeling, but the people who do buy from you, no matter how small, are letting you work towards your dream of becoming an independent business, and I think you should really appreciate every single person that buys your items. So I do try and make an effort with all my customers. Hopefully they agree that I do as well, but definitely when I first started out, that's what I used to do. Happy Shopper asked a very, very good question, and it will be the last sort of question that I answer. Do you really need to change the needle on your sewing machine every single garment or project? And is it really necessary to use a ballpoint needle for knits? So I don't change my needle every time I start a new garment or project, mainly because if I did, I would be buying about 100 needles a week. Some days I sew straight from 9 AM right through to 6 PM. Obviously I stop for lunch and tea breaks, but if I had to change my needle after every single order that I made, I'd be throwing I'd have a bin full of needles. So it's hard to explain, but I change my needle at least, if I say I've got a business week where I'm sewing orders all week, I will probably change my needle probably twice that week, because I do notice a difference when I start making something, if it starts getting a bit thready or a bit catchy. So I change it. So maybe maximum I change it twice a week, but then I always change it to the needle that I need for each project. So I don't just leave a universal one in there and hope that it works for everything. It won't. I do change my needles a couple of times for different things. And is a ballpoint needle necessary for knits? Yes. You might not think so, and I didn't think so at the beginning, but since using ballpoint needles, it has made a huge difference. It goes through the machine a lot better, and it doesn't pull it underneath as much, which is very frustrating when you've got stretchy knit, especially like really loose stretch knit. It always pulls underneath, but ballpoint needles really, really help. And if you've got a good foot on your machine to help guide it through very slowly, you might need to adjust your foot pressure. My mum actually gave me a tip that on my Janie machine, there's a quilting set that comes with it, and it's got a quilter's walking foot, which is like this huge quilting foot that sort of like slowly pulls the fabric, and that has been a huge help for when I've got really, really tricky stretch fabrics, because it helps just evenly distribute the fabric underneath, so it doesn't like pull it through and stretch it as it's sewing, and then you get all that like bobbly seam. So that has been a huge tip, so thanks for that, Mum. But yeah, so if you've got a Janie machine, you've got the quilting walking foot, try it on your stretch knits because it does make a difference. Right, I've nearly lost my voice. I should have drunk that tea that I left over there. Never mind. Thank you very much for all your questions. I thought that I'd get maybe like 3 or 4. I'm sorry if this has been a very long video for you, but I really hope that at least 50% of what I've answered has been useful in some way. Again, if there's anything else from this video that you'd like to ask me, please comment below and I will just answer it in the comments. So if you are interested, read the comments below if you want to find out some more things. And maybe in a month or two, when I'm actually in my house, we can do another Q&A on some different things, maybe a bit more specific, I'm not sure. But this has been a really fun video for me to do, just a general Q&A in my lovely vintage Space Cat jumper, just chilling in the sunshine. So thank you very much for that. We did go to the house today, and I've got doors and windows now, and the painters have started painting the walls, so it's looking very real. So the builder thinks that we'll be in a couple of weeks. So in a few weeks I might actually be in my house, which would be glorious. Luna's not gonna know what to do, because she's got very settled here, because she'd only been in our house a week before we moved out, so it's going to be quite confusing for her, but I think she'll like it because the garden's all enclosed, so I don't have to sort of take her out on the lead, because here there's a river at the end of the garden, so I have to like keep taking her outside with the lead on. Anyway, I'm going completely off topic now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you want to watch more of my videos, and I will see you hopefully next week for another video. Happy handmade, everyone.